It's good to see you all this morning. As we continue today to talk about the Spirit of God, we'll look at His plan, and especially the sentiments of the song that we just sang, and that of our invitation song, To Christ Be True. And I want to call to your attention things that you probably don't pay attention to. We look over them, or they just seem like part of society or culture. Now I want to bring them to our attention because we are supposed to be paying attention to what's going on around us, not to be deceived by things. We look at 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 8 about the devil being a roaring lion, and the picture is so bold and so outstanding of this ferocious animal that we should shy away from, or that we should hide from, that we want no part with. We may quickly look over too fast. Be sober-minded, be watchful, pay attention so that you can resist him. Not just that he's there, we know that part. We hammer that one home. I hammer that one home. But the statement opens with, pay attention. That's what the sober-mindedness is all about. Having your wits about you. Pay attention. Pay attention to what? 1 John chapter 4 and verse 8 tells us that what we should pay attention to is keeping ourselves away from idols. Oh, we don't have idols anymore. We don't have statues that are built so that we could go and offer pigs and goats to them. We don't have idols anymore. Or do we? So let's pay attention to the paganism that's in our lives. Paganism, worshiping something that is not our God. And I understand that that's not a perfect definition. But that's the definition we'll work with this morning. Worshiping many gods, or worshiping gods that are not ours. If anyone teaches a different doctrine and does not agree with the sound words of our Lord Jesus Christ and with the teaching that accords with godliness, he's puffed up with conceit and understands nothing. He has an unhealthy craving for controversy and for quarrels about words, which produce envy, dissension, slander, and evil suspicions. A different doctrine than that of our God. So we may not see an idol, but the teachings that the idol might have presented can still be strong. You say, well, I don't worship any goats. Okay, but do you know the doctrine of goats? I use that because that's just arbitrary and weird. But even though you don't know the name of the God you may be serving, if you follow his doctrine or her doctrine, that doesn't mean that we don't serve them. So their doctrines, their teachings, or the things of the pagan gods, we have to pay attention to as well. It goes far beyond actually kneeling at an altar of a different god. Knowing and paying attention to their doctrine in our lives is condemned. The Spirit expressly says in later times, some will depart from the faith by devoting themselves to deceitful spirits and the teachings of demons. This is written to Timothy, but it's specifically for all of the Christians, all of us. So this is something that we have to pay attention to. Doctrine and Scripture are good for forever. Not one jot or tittle will pass away. The word of the Lord will not be gone. Heaven and earth will pass away, but the word of the Lord remains forever, and so this remains for us. If it was a problem that they could have dealt with in the first century, and the first century only, there was no reason for God to save these words for us. Therefore, this must be a problem that we can have too. This could be a problem that we have. So let's pay attention to it. The first one that I'd like to look at, as far as looking at pagan things and not paying attention to God's plan, is chance. Ecclesiastes 9 verse 11 says, "Again I saw that under the sun the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to those with knowledge. But time and chance happen to all." There are some people that worship chance, or the fact that there's an opportunity for something else to happen. We don't give God the credit for having control over all things. And while Ecclesiastes 9:11 does point out that not everyone gets their just deserves at the end of their work schedule, and that aberrant things do happen, or things that are not normal or out of the ordinary do happen, 1 Kings 5:4 uses the same word and says God is in control. The same word that is using is, "There is neither adversary nor misfortune." But the statement before that is that God is in control. But now the Lord my God has given me rest on every side. There is neither adversary nor misfortune. These things don't exist because what is a chance for us is known to the Lord. If I took a quarter and flipped it in the air, what are the chances that it's going to land on heads, or the chance that it will land on tails? It's not a chance. The Lord knows what it's going to be. It's not an opportunity for fortune to happen or misfortune to happen. God knows what the answer is. It is Him, it is God who controls chances. So while we have luck, or we would consider luck to be a thing, and we would consider chance to be a thing, understand that what we're talking about is a deity for other religions. Luck is a Greek god. The Roman name for luck is Fortuna. And she is the one who is charged with, as a god, bringing fortune or misfortune to her city that either blesses or does not bless her. So this is where our concept of luck comes from. That of fortune and misfortune, taken out of context from the scriptures that are on the screen at this time, they're the primary doctrines of three Eastern or Indian religions, of Buddhism, of Hinduism, and of Jainism. Which from the research I've done on that sounds an awful lot like Buddhism to me, but I don't know a lot there. The concept is karma. Don't do this because it'll do that. Now, I've retired from being a paramedic, and karma is the strongest god that they have. It is. You can't order supper because karma says, as soon as you order supper, you're going to go on a call. You can't lay your head on a pillow and plan to get a good night's rest because as soon as you do, you're going to go on a call. You can't say, "It sure is quiet around here," because something bad will happen. And I know several of you are in the healthcare industry. That holds pretty true for hospitals, emergency rooms as well. You want to make a lot of enemies, go into an emergency room and say, "Well, you guys sure aren't doing a whole lot tonight, are you?" We use the same thing in our common life. Today was a easy day. Well, we know what that means. Tomorrow is going to be terrible. We would even hold it that there is power over Monday. And that's the hardest one to break, right? Because Monday is a thing. But is that opportunity, is that chance, is that a god of this world that is driving that? Or is that the schedule and set natural order that God has placed? Don't allow things that are established by God, rules that He has put into place, be considered something else. So that when you wake up this morning, you say, "It looks like a beautiful day. We sure got lucky." That's taking power away from God. God gave you this day. This is a day that the Lord has made. Rejoice and be glad in it. Don't credit that to some other deity that we don't even count the deity anymore. We don't even know who they are. But the credit should go to God. God is the one who controls all. God is over everything. The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. As for you, you meant it for evil. God meant it for good. God knows what's happening. He knows this world. He created it. This is my Father's world. He made this place. And everything that happens here is by His design. The evil that is still here is allowed by Him, given opportunity to repent. And yet we would hold to superstitions. We may even perpetuate superstition. Don't ever walk under a ladder. Don't open an umbrella indoors. If you don't repost this on Facebook, God will not bless you. How many of them? How many of them? Now there are signs and seasons that we're told that we can discern. Jesus Himself says that you can know what the signs and the seasons are and things that are to come, so that we can look at, is it a worm? I missed it. We just got here last year when y'all were talking about it. There's a fruit or a nut that you can anticipate what the winter is going to be like based off of you know what I'm talking about. That is discerning the times and the seasons. That's not, I wonder if we're going to get lucky. Will it be a good winter or not? Let's see what He says. Do not take away things that belong to God. Give Him the glory. So be careful when you say something. You say, I don't want it to happen, so I'll... Come now. Give your God more credit than knocking on some wood. They're pagan beliefs that we've incorporated. And like I said, we just feel like they're normal. And we don't mean anything by them. But what we're not doing is giving credit to God. We are supposed to belong to God. We may not have understood these things, but we become daily better servants of His through understanding more about Him. In Galatians chapter 4, starting in verse 8, formerly when you did not know God, you were enslaved to those that by nature were not God's. But now you have come to know God, or rather to be known by God. How can you turn back again to the weak and worthless principles of the world, whose slaves you want to be once more? You observe the days and the months and the seasons and the years. I'm afraid I may have labored over you in vain. You're going to pay attention to that? You're going to throw things away for superstition? Have nothing to do with that. Don't have anything to do with, what do you mean I got to walk around this ladder? Or what do you mean there's a black cat that crossed the road and I have to take a different path? Have nothing to do with that. It's irreverent to your God. And it's a wonderful opportunity, especially toward the end of my time as a paramedic, and someone would say something taboo, like, it sure is quiet around here. Dude, don't say that, don't say that. You know how busy you'll get. No, it won't get busy because I said that, because I'm a Christian and my God's in control of this world. And I don't believe in your karma or your other principle from whatever religion you want to claim. Now, do you want to learn more about my God? Because this is not the way my God operates. Wow, what a teaching opportunity. It didn't make a whole lot of friends, but what a teaching opportunity. When you say, well, look, there's a black cat, we got to go around. You must not know a whole lot about God. Can we talk about Him? Would you like to talk about God? And I'll tell you why this black cat thing doesn't work. And take the insert out of your material, make notes on it, and you can have that study with them. Call me. I would love to be in that study with you. And the easiest way to do it is Google luck, fortune, mythology on these characters, and you will learn what people have taken away from God and given to these other gods. We're not supposed to look like this world. We're supposed to be different. We're not supposed to have to pay attention to umbrellas indoors and silliness and irreverent myths. But we are something different. In Acts chapter 19, those who practiced magic, when they became believers, they stopped practicing magic. They brought their magic together and they disposed of their magic. They got rid of it. They burned it. They brought the books together and burned them in the sight of all. Acts chapter 19 and verse 19. They got rid of it. Destroy this out of your life. The knocking on wood. The not counting to God the things that are God's. When Paul and Barnabas were preaching, they were called Zeus and Hermes, the names of Greek gods. And the priest of Zeus, Acts chapter 14 and verse 13, whose temple was at the entrance of the city, brought oxen and garlands to the gates and wanted to offer a sacrifice with the crowds. We're going to celebrate Paul. We're going to celebrate Barnabas. These are obviously gods among us. Let's celebrate these religious, these paganistic ideas. When Barnabas and Paul heard it, this is what Christians did. They tore their garments and rushed out into the crowd, saying, "Men, why are you doing these things? Stop it. Don't let it go. You can call this down." Oh, I believe that if you say it sure is quiet, it's going to get really busy around here. I defy your God, because my God's not like that. Call them out. You don't have to make enemies about it, but don't let that God be glorified, because he is not the one that you profess to serve. That's not the way our God operates. Do them a favor and teach them the truth about how this world works. The truth about the God that you serve. And Jesus promises that that will set them free, that learning the truth of the matter offers freedom. If nothing else, it may get them home faster, because they didn't have to turn away from that silly black cat. The Lord has established his throne in the heavens, and his kingdom rules over all. Nehemiah 9:6, "You are the Lord, you alone. You have made heaven, and the heaven of heavens, with all their hosts, and the earth with all that is on it, the sea and all that is in them, the seas and all that is in them, and you preserve all of them. The host of heaven worships you." God is in control. Everything is subject to God, and it has nothing to do with luck. Well, why does things like this happen? Because that's the order that God has set it in. And we're supposed to have understandings that we can have about the seasons and the times and cause and effect and the things that will happen. And we're also told that you don't have a perfect understanding of how all of this will happen. And that while even something so serious as you praying for someone to continue in this physical life goes, that person may be done with it and ready to move on to their eternal reward, so that you would have both praying. And which one does God hear? That's for God to decide. And that we have things that don't have cause and effect, because they are of the mind of God. And it's given to us in the statement of Matthew chapter 5 and verse 45. He makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good. And he sends rain on the just and the unjust. Just because you can figure out some things doesn't mean that you can figure out everything. And we have to give God the credit for what he has done for us and what he is doing in our lives. Well, why is this thing happening? Or why is this thing happening to me? It's happening to you so that you can glorify God. Why was Esther put into the power that she was put into? Because she was a beautiful woman? Well, she was a beautiful woman. Because she should be able to seduce the king? Well, she did get the role as queen. But the reason that she's here, according to Mordecai, is so that she can effect change and save the lives, to be a deliverer of the Jews. One of the most powerful lines for any sermon on providence that you could possibly use is, "Who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Why is this happening to me? So that I can glorify God. Why did this have to happen in my life? So that by it I could glorify God. And now we have an opportunity. Are we strong enough to glorify God in everything that he brings us to? That's a hard question to answer. Are you strong enough to glorify God in everything that he brings you to? There's an awful lot of people who've been made low nearby to us recently. How can we glorify God? How can they glorify God with the opportunity that they've been given to do so? Because it doesn't feel like an opportunity when you're facing trouble and when you're facing problems. That's where the real power of the 23rd Psalm starts to show up. So that we see in the 5th verse that God has prepared a table before me in the presence of my enemies. In the presence of my enemies? Really? Right here in front of all the problems, in front of all the trials, in front of every bad thing that could possibly happen in my life, I'm supposed to trust in God's nourishment for me. And it's hard to do. It sounds good. 23rd Psalm's read a lot. It's a lot harder than it reads to trust in the providence of God. And don't we dare at the end of that say, man, did I get lucky? No. You give God the glory. Don't be afraid of the superstitions. Be like Elijah. Well, Elijah was a prophet, and Elijah was bold, and he was brash, and he put 850 people to death on Mount Carmel and said, yeah, but right before that, he called out that God, those two gods, and said all kinds of things of mockery against them on Mount Carmel, and then turned and expressed his faith in his God. And his God, our God, overcame. Did Elijah get lucky? Was he fortunate? Was he flipping a coin? Or was he calling on his God and glorifying the creator of this earth? Now that we see and we look at these things, say, God is overall. Let's pay more attention to what he's doing in our lives. Why is it that this bad thing happened? Or why is it that this good thing is not happening to me? It's a wonderful question. Let's take it to our God and figure out in the meantime how to glorify his name. But at the least, as we started this sermon, let's pay closer attention to what we're saying and who we're attributing praise to, because this is his plan for his children on his earth. To help us to remember that, David, would you lead us in prayer? He passed by, he saw a man blind from birth, and his disciples said to him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, it don't work like that. It don't work like that. This man is this way so that the power of God, the works of God, might be displayed in him. Do you think that's any consolation to that mother when that child is 3 years old? I don't know how old this guy is, 20 to 70 years old? Probably not 70. His parents are still alive. I don't know how old he is, but do you think when he was 3 years old and his parents figured out that he couldn't see? Do they have consolation at that moment that he's going to glorify God? No. When he can't do the things that the other children do, when he can't go out and play without someone paying attention, that he doesn't fall off of a cliff or get run over in the street, is it consolation to them? He's blind. This circumstance exists. And until this moment, whenever Jesus heals this man's blindness and glorifies God in front of the Pharisees, do the parents have any consolation at all? Does the man himself, who's had to learn to tie his own or strap his own sandals and put on his own clothing, he's had to learn to fold his money a specific way so that he knows which denominations of bills are which denominations of bills. He's had to learn what flour smells like and what makes that different than sugar. And what makes that different than anything else that's powdered. That'd be a horrible cornbread. Were there any consolation before this moment? Just like that in your life, I don't know what's coming in the future. I don't know when your problems are going to be over. And I don't know what problems are ahead. None of us can know that. But your God has scheduled for those things to happen. He knows how long they will exist. He knows when they will come to an end. And it's to glorify His name. You know what's even worse in this story? If you read it really, really close, he's blind that the works of God might be displayed in him. He's not even healed from his blindness so that he can see. He's healed from his blindness so the Pharisees can see. It ain't even for him that the miracle is done. And it may be that the problems that we have to deal with in life are given to us just because we're strong enough to take it. So, well, that sounds very encouraging. It doesn't sound encouraging to somebody who is dealing with a problem that won't go away or with a problem that won't resolve. Just because I'm strong enough to die of cancer doesn't mean it's going to make my wife any happier. I don't have cancer, and I pray for those who do. I'm trying to illustrate that just because we're strong enough to deal with a problem doesn't mean it's any less than a problem. What it does mean, though, is that we are supposed to glorify God. Later on in this chapter, it's brought out in verse 35. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, those Pharisees, and having found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" And he answered, "And who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus said to him, "You've seen him, and it is he that is speaking to you." And he said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshiped him. As we enjoyed the communion this morning, the memorial feast, the Lord's Supper, commemorating his death, we express that we do believe. Now I know that there's all kinds of problems in this world, and I know that it's easy to just dismiss things as, well, that's just the way the world works. But every bad thing that happens is to wake people up. Every bad thing that we have to go through should glorify God. It's his plan. God desires all people to be saved. He desires for all of us who have not been baptized into him to do so and become members of his body, saved Christians who can glorify his name in all situations. Maybe we've gone through situations and we haven't glorified his name. And we haven't attributed to him the glory that he is due. Let's pay attention as we move forward, as we leave here this morning, to give God the glory that he deserves. Well, we can't do that because we can't give that much glory, but we can give all that we can. Everyone who believes in him will not be put to shame, but we must be different than the rest of this world around us.